Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out for this. So excited. The book of Job was a little bit weary when I thought, let's do the book of Job, because it's such a immense book. I hope you got through it in the time I gave you to get through it. Now, show of hands, who has any questions about the book of Job? Well, join the club, and if by the end of this I've not answered your questions on the book of Job, once again join the club. There are so many questions when it comes to the book of Job that I'm just trying to set reality there. We're not going to answer every question. We're not going to get into every detail about the book of Job. We would be here until next year and still not cover everything, The book of Job is incredibly unique. It's incredibly unique in the Bible, although you'll notice that in our Bible, it actually begins our poetry section or our wisdom section. Those are the terms often associated. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. They're Hebrew poetry, not English poetry that rhymes. Of course, we also know that a lot of English poetry doesn't rhyme. Bob Dylan would be a great example of poetry that didn't always rhyme. The book of Job is incredibly unique to Near Eastern culture even. We don't have time to get into specifics, but with the amount of literature, especially from the early 20th century on and on, that's been discovered about the Near East and the Middle East, the book of Job has some parallels with other texts, but nothing that actually makes it unified, as in this is the same kind of literature. The book of Job asks deep questions. It gets deep very quickly. And the book of Job refuses to hold your hand and to walk with you through it. The book of Job kind of pushes you into the deep end and kind of says, there's mysteries in life. There's mysteries in faith. Joining it, Very quickly, when was the book of Job written? Great question. Nobody knows the answer to that question. What was that?
First year of Cyrus.
Oh, okay. It may have originally been written in Arabic in a pre-Mosaic period. Definitely, if you ask me, before the exile. This is the view of the Talmud. The Talmud is the collection of Jewish literature seen as authoritative by Jews on, you want to read Torah, and then you want to live Torah. So how do you live Torah? You consult Talmud, and Talmud will tell you how to live Torah. Well, Talmud will also tell you how to do all of Judaism. You have the short version of Talmud, and then you have the long version of Talmud. I just want to tell you I've not read it. Don't want to put that out there. But the Talmud's view was that this was an ancient writing, predating Mosaic times, predating Mosaic writings. The evidence within the book allows for this, but it doesn't demand it. The bottom line is, we don't know. There's other views. Nobody has found the first copy, written in the year of whatever. During the time of the patriarchs, before or during Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, makes a lot of sense with what we meet in the book of Job. What we see going on in the book of Job can be accounted for during this time period. And in fact, I'm going to argue for that as we get into it even more. Is the book of Job a legend? Is Job a myth? Well, like I just said, the book of Job has no true parallels. When we have discovered these ancient texts, we do see that it's a type of wisdom literature. But we don't see another book that, fits it identically. Now, the book of Job, I don't believe it's the everyman's path. I don't believe that we're supposed to identify with Job. We become Job as we read through it, and yet we can relate. to certain things that Job goes through, certain things that Job says, right? But I don't believe that we're supposed to see ourselves in Job, as though Job is an archetype and we meet that archetype. It's not an epic in the literary genre of the term epic. I realize that the word epic has undertaken a renaissance within the last 5 or 10 years. Everything is now epic. But in the literary sense, it really doesn't meet the other criteria that we see in an epic. Oftentimes in an epic, the hero has to take a journey, has to travel over seas, and has to go through forests, and has to climb mountains, or has to go into another world, another realm, travel time. Things like that are often seen in epics. We don't see Job himself. There's no reason to believe he moved too far during our story. You know, if this was a play production, it would be great. You would only need one scenery. We could do stuff on stage left. We could do stuff on stage right. You wouldn't have to build numerous, set pieces to put on the book of Job, would you? It's not a hero's tale either, in the sense that, is Job our hero in the way we have other heroes in epic literature? Job himself doesn't actually do anything legendary in the text, when you think about it. Now, I say that knowing that he has a theophany. He has a conversation with God, and I just said that he didn't do anything legendary. But what I mean by that is he doesn't... This isn't Hercules or Heracles, where you have to perform these tasks in order to become well-known and great and so forth. Job doesn't ever use any mythical symbols. Oftentimes in epic literature, the protagonist has to make that journey and has to get something, oftentimes a MacGuffin, that will then be used in the final conflict in an epic, right? Job doesn't even overcome any obstacles in any kind of real sense of, well, when we read the book of Job, you could see Satan as his obstacle. He doesn't fight Satan. He doesn't overcome Satan. He doesn't use anything to overcome Satan. Job himself, he's not special in any kind of, he's super smart, he's super strong. The text does tell us that he's upright and righteous, fearing God and shunning evil. But those themselves, one, they don't protect him in the trials, and two, they're not what makes him achieve anything or overcome anything in the end of the story. So really, as far as it being a legend or as far as being a myth, it doesn't have the elements that we often look for in myth or in legend. So I see no problem in understanding Job to be a literal person who literally existed at some point in time in history, and this is a poetic retelling of that. Does that make sense? We meet a very interesting character in the book of Job, and you'll notice it's the Satan. And you might be sitting there going, why did you put the definite article in front of Satan? That's not the way we speak of the devil. Well, there, I just used the definite article, and even that speak of the devil. But Satan, though... we often think of Satan as a proper noun. That's one of his names or one of his titles, things of that nature. But in the book of Job, actually in the Hebrew, we have the definite article in front of every time Satan shows up. The sons of God come before the throne of God, and thus Satan is also there. You notice that's not in our English text because that's not the way we speak. But in the Hebrew, it's there. Now, the book of Job is a very, very, very old writing, even if you have a later date than I do. And we don't find in the Hebrew that Satan has taken on this immense role, this complete God-Satan kind of theology that we have today in Christianity, right? The word Satan actually appears other places in the text that we don't immediately associate it with the devil. When Balaam gets on his donkey and gets to riding to go get paid by Balak to curse Israel, we know that an angel shows up and prevents the donkey from moving. The text actually refers to that angel as the Satan, not in a devil sense, but what does the word Satan mean? Does anybody know that? Nope. Adversary. It means adversary, and in that text, the angel is the adversary of Balaam. But we don't look at that angel then as the devil in our sense of devil, right? So we meet this person here in the Job text, the Satan. Now, you've got to admit the Old Testament doesn't have a lot about the devil. It's there, but it's not really fleshed out. And therefore, interpretations and traditions have been given a lot. I'm really trying to stress this. Have been given a lot of authority on the topic of the devil and of Satan and so forth. Now, the thing I realize is that's a topic that we want to discuss. We want to get into it, But it's not necessary for this book, and we do have to get through this book. So I realize you have tons of questions about the devil and about Satan, but here in this book, we'll just let him be the character that we'll see in the book. And maybe in another class, we can get more into, especially this thing that I just pointed out. There's very little in the Old Testament about Satan and about the devil. And we all know, though, some certain things. He was once an angel and he fell from heaven, but we don't know where that story is. We know that there's this reference in Isaiah. We know that there's this reference in Ezekiel. And some people have said that that's the interpretation of that. But you read those texts and you go, well, maybe, but in the context, it's really not there, is it? So anyways, we'll let this figure, the devil, be the character that we meet in the book of Job. And then in another class, perhaps we'll get into more about him. Okay? The Satan actually asks probably one of the most important questions of the book. And I realize that I just qualified that with probably one of the most important, because the book of Job asks some terrific questions. It's really hard to pinpoint this is the most important question of the book. But I want you to see the question that the question that the Satan poses. Does Job fear God for nothing? You've protected him, you've blessed him, his house and everything he's worked out. Why wouldn't Job fear you? You've got his back. So the Satan poses to God that the only reason that Job fears God and shuns evil is because you've protected him. You've taken care of him. Of course he fears you. Of course he wants you to remain happy with him because you've given him everything he wants. So that's Satan's challenge. That's the thing that Satan begins this topic with. Chapters 1 and chapter 2 are our prologue, and it's very interesting because we, the audience, we get to know some things that the characters in the rest of the story don't get to know. They don't get to know when it happens, and even by the end of the story, there's no reason to assume that the characters have figured out what's happened. We get this inside information. Job is a man. He lives in the land of Uz. There's some debate over where exactly this land of Uz is and where we should put it. I don't think it's important to pinpoint a geographical location. He is blameless and upright, which is not sinless. We should not read the book of Job and read that point that he's upright and righteous and think that somehow he's also sinless. That's not what the text says. Job himself never presents himself as sinless. The friends, of course, never assume that he's sinless. And so this idea that he's blameless, he's upright, he fears God, and he turns from evil. He is a type of righteous that's very good, but not like a sinless perfection. He's not an archetype for Christ, right? How many of you had a friend growing up who never wanted to get in trouble? I had one friend, he never wanted to get in trouble. I always wanted to get in trouble. Some of you don't have some of you don't doubt that, huh? Anyways, so that's what I kind of associate this Job guy with. He's the kind of guy who never wanted to get in trouble. He always wanted to be the good kid, you know? He has 7 sons, he has 3 daughters, he's very, very wealthy. This is one of the reasons I don't think we're supposed to see ourselves as a type of Job. Because who here is very, very wealthy? There you go. And throughout all of world history, how many people have reached that echelon of very, very wealthy? So I don't believe that we're supposed to identify with we're Job, Job is us. He's possibly one of the greatest men of the East. He's religious and he functions as the priest in his household. Remember that it says that the sons and daughters always feast, and then Job gets up early in the morning and offers sacrifices just in case they've cursed God in their heart. I don't believe that as we read the book of Job, Job or his friends are terribly well versed in any special revelation. That is, I don't even think they possess a final copy of the book of Genesis. Now, they make references which are very interesting, which tell me they're familiar with the creation account. And in fact, Job, interestingly, in his first speech, I think he's very familiar with the Genesis account because he almost reverses the Genesis account. He's almost crying for the reversal of existence in his first speech. I would describe Job and his friends' religion not as a Romans chapter 1 verses 18 through 32 type of religion, but more of a Romans chapter 2 verses 11 through 16 type of religion. What do I mean by that? Well, in the book of Romans, Romans chapter 1 verses 18 through 23, Paul has a position. His position is that everybody can know there's a God. Everybody can know there's a God, and everybody can know there's a God because of creation. Because of the order that we see in creation, men are without excuse. With that, you will either worship the Creator or you'll worship the creation. Verse 19, that subjective knowledge of there has to be a God can either be suppressed or it can be perverted. The order that we see in creation can be twisted. And I think that that's what Paul is getting at there in Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 2, Paul talks about Gentiles not having the law who still do things required by the law. And it's their conscience either convicting them or acquitting them. I think that that type of religion that Paul talks about, Gentiles not having the law but still obeying the conscience law, I think that's the type of religion that Job and his friends mostly have. We'll see some elements of their theology, and we'll ask questions about some of the elements of their theology. But they're not a Romans chapter 1 where they deny that there's a creator or that they're intentionally trying to twist the creation. I do believe they have a bit of bad theology. I believe Job and I believe his friends have a bit of bad theology. But the only reason I believe that is because I have more special revelation. I have the whole Bible that I can balance their theology against. And Romans chapter 1, Satan's challenge. Job is only good because God has been good to him. Verses 13 through 19, all that Job has is taken away from him. The cattle and the sheep are taken away. All of his wealth is taken away. The house collapses. His children are taken away from him. And Satan went before God and said, take all of those things away from him and he will curse you to your face. Job does not curse God to his face, does he? Job questions God's judgment, not in chapter 1, but as we progress through this, Job is going to question God's justice, God's judgments, and God's actions. But there's a difference between questioning and cursing, isn't there? You've got to admit somebody disagrees with you. And they come up to you and they want to know, what is your position? Help me to understand this. And that is much, much different than your position is stupid. Here's why your position is stupid. We can see that, can't we? We see that in our normal day, our normal life. And you've got to admit you are going to react differently to the person that's actually trying to dialogue versus the person that's trying to attack, huh? Job, I think he gets very close in some of his speeches to attacking God's justice. I don't think he ever actually crosses that line, but we'll get into that. So when chapter 1's tragedies happen, there's something that the problem with translating things into English is we lose some of the plays on words that are present there in the Hebrew. The word arose and the word fell in the Hebrew have similar sounds, which make this statement that Job arose, he tore his robe, he shaved his head, he fell. There's a beautiful sound in the Hebrew that's not there in the English. There's two movements going on here. There's a rising and there's a falling. And when he falls, all he can do is worship. He doesn't cry out, God, why me? He doesn't shake his fists at God. And in fact, he submits to God's sovereignty, which is a very critical and important thing that I think we today can learn from Job. Not an immediate, why me? Not an immediate, how dare you, God? But God's in control. We'll get into that more, obviously. Job's realization. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. That is, naked I shall die. Now here's where we see some beautiful Hebrew poetry going on in the text. And this actually is one of those things that does translate into the English very well. Now in a literal sense, Job is correct that you come forth naked from your mother's womb. But he's not using naked in the literal sense when you die, is he? What instead is that second nakedness in this text? I'm not hearing you.
Openly and honestly.
I don't quite think so. I don't quite think so. I think naked in the second context is literally nothing. You come with nothing and you go with nothing. You can't take anything with you when you go into death, can you? And so there's this very beautiful poetry going on here where there's one part that's literal and then there's another part where you've taken that literalness and you've used it as a metaphor. And I think we see that later in the text also. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job uses the special name of Yahweh 3 times here in reference to his submission to God. And I think that is powerful. Now, I've heard people question Job's theology right there. Because Job just said, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. And some people have had a problem with that second phrase of Job there, the Lord taketh away. And we, the audience, could raise our hands right now and say to Job, no, the Lord didn't take it away from you. The Satan took it away from you. So your second statement isn't true, Job. But look at what our author tells us. Verse 22, chapter 1, verse 22. With Job's words, he did not sin. We can also translate that he did not say anything foolish. He said nothing foolish by saying, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, we have encountered one of our first obstacles as the audience, haven't we? Because we hear Job's words attributing his loss to God, and we know the secret. We know what Job doesn't know, and that is, it wasn't God being the active agent here. The Satan is the active agent here that took this stuff away from you, Job. So, what do we do with that? And what will God do with that? What will Job's friends do with that? What will our author do with that? The second test, chapter 2 and chapter 1 have so many parallels. We could sit here literally all day just counting the parallels between chapter 1 and chapter 2. The Satan, he now believes that just one more test, just give me one more test and I can push Job over the line. The first test was external. The second test needs to be internal. Here's this beautiful play on words in the book of Job that's so hard to pick up in the English. In chapter 1 verse 9, Satan's words to God. Does Job fear God for nothing? Chapter 2 verse 3. God says, you incited me. Let's put a pin in that for a second. You incited me against him without cause. It's the same word going on. God is taking Satan's words and throwing them back in his face in this instance. And it's one of those times that unfortunately we can either all learn Hebrew or we can just try and look for these beautiful plays on words in the English. God takes responsibility. God takes responsibility for Job's loss. You incited me against him. And it was God who allowed Satan to do this. So I don't think that Job's words are wrong. In chapter 1 verse 21, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. I don't think Job's words are wrong here in a moment when we get to chapter 2 verse 10. Shall we accept good from God and not accept adversity? There are other passages here in our text where nobody corrects Job's theology. God doesn't correct Job's theology, and our author doesn't correct Job's theology. And I think that this points to one of the greatest mysteries about faith, and that is that God is sovereign. God is in absolute control. But how does that play out? And what does that mean when tragedy strikes? What does that mean when it seems that things are out of control? God is still sovereign. God is still in control. The book of Job asks that question and wrestles with that question. That's one of the biggest questions that we have going on in the book of Job. There's no other passage that challenges this. Job and his friends, you got to keep in mind that they don't know that this is a test. We have that special knowledge that this is a test. There's no textual reason to believe that Job or his friends even have a Satan in their theology. All that they have is a monotheism where God is in control of all things. What does that mean for God to be in control of all things? Well, we're going to see what they think it means for God to be in control of all things. So I don't think it's wrong for us to believe in the sovereignty of God. And I don't think it's wrong for us to believe that all things are under God's control. Now, I do think that it's wrong if we respond differently than Job does to this idea, to this point. I do think that we have to accept, or I do think that it's wrong if we don't accept that God has a bigger and a better understanding than we do. I think it's wrong if we act like a child when it comes to this. I want to ask you a question. Who here likes cake? Who here likes ice cream? Who here likes sodas? Now that you guys are adults, did you realize that tonight for dinner, if you want, you can have cake for dinner? You can. Nobody can tell you not to have cake for dinner. When you were a child, though, if you went to mom or dad and said, I don't want to have meat and potatoes. I don't want to have vegetables and whatnot. I want to have cake for dinner. And mom and dad say to you, no, you can't have cake for dinner. You have to eat your dinner. Now, from a child's perspective, you just think mom and dad are just being mean, huh? That's just the way children think. Is anybody picking up what I'm reading lately anyways? Hint, hint. Anyways, I think that it's wrong then for us to have that child's perspective when it comes to dinner and mom and dad not giving us the dinner we want. We have to accept that God is in charge. But is it possible then that we could approach God's in-chargeness or God's sovereignty the same way a child approaches dinner, only wanting cake and ice cream for dinner, and not understanding that God may have a better view of nutrition? Just nutrition. God may have a better understanding of nutrition. If God has a better understanding of nutrition, is it possible God has a better understanding of all things? Interestingly, here's one of those times that we continue this mystery. Here's one of those times we continue to see this. Satan has to say, you put forth your hand now and touch his bones. Then he'll curse you to your face. God's answer, Job is in your power. It could also be translated, Job is in your hands. So here's this thing again where Satan is saying, your hand's against him. But God is saying, use your hands. Which just begs that question of how does this work? Which is a very interesting question. Here, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, I'll actually be addressing this a little bit better. There's this both mentality. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. Joseph's brothers hated him, right? And they grab him and they throw him in a ditch or in a cistern or something, right? And they're planning to kill him, right? And then they see this caravan of Ishmael traders. They pull him up out of the pit and they sell him into slavery. Does anybody think that the brothers are not evil at this moment? Yes, their actions are completely evil. And Joseph points this out at the end of the Joseph story, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. You brothers meant this for evil, but God meant this for good. And we stand here wondering, how is this possible that the same action, only one action happened. He was sold into slavery. And they, the people or the creatures, they meant it for evil, but being meant for good by God, the Creator. How is that possible? One action can be meant for evil. That same action can be meant for good. That's it. That's an incredible question. That's an incredible thing. Let's keep going. No one is like God. That is just, that's a Sunday school answer, but that's also such a true answer, isn't it? Nobody is like God. Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10. He knows the end from the beginning. We don't know the end from the beginning, do we? We would love to in some cases, you have to admit. You just want to pull back the curtain and just figure out, God, why this? I can't see the wisdom in this. There has to be wisdom in this. Let me pull back the curtain and see what's the wisdom in this. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21. Many are the plans in the heart of man, creature, but the purposes of the Lord, Creator, will succeed. We live in this strange reality where we will act. And we could act with malice. We could act with evil. And yet the purposes of God can still be brought about. The Satan acknowledges this in saying that your hand has to do this. God says, He's in your hands. Both are true. Both are true. And this leads us to another one of our big questions about the book of Job. Why would God do this? Why would God do this? Now, once again, we're standing here from our human perspective. That's an important thing to realize, especially with what happens here shortly. Job loses his health. That's the second test. The Satan said that all of this other stuff was external. A man will give up everything for his life, though. He's already lost his wealth. Now he loses his health. Verse 8, chapter 2, verse 8, sitting. Now, the word in the Hebrew here is the word sit. But it doesn't communicate just the average, you're tired and you just take a quick rest. You sit down for a moment. The word sit here could actually be also translated dwell. You've got to admit that you're not dwelling in your chair until you've been there for quite a while, right? You know, if you never left your chair, then we could say that person dwells in that chair. But for right now, we usually just say you're sitting in the chair, right? Where's he sitting? He's sitting in ashes. He's sitting in ashes. I want you to put a pin in that. I want you to notice something about that, but that comes later. But right now, he's just sitting in ashes. Job's wife is an interesting character here in our story. Job's wife comes on stage for just a moment, says just like one line, 2 lines, leaves the stage, and we never see her again in the entire play production. But another character has also disappeared. From now on, we don't see Satan. We don't see the Satan again in our text. Now, interestingly, Job's wife, her words reflect what Satan said. That's an interesting thought. Now, we have some unanswerable questions about this wife. Is this wife, was she the mom of the deceased kids? Is it her kids that just died, or at least some of her kids that just died? Will she be the mom of the kids at the end of our story? Did she accept the common wisdom of the day? God punishes the wicked. Ergo, Job must be wicked. His wickedness brought this about. Now I have to ask you a question before we condemn the wife. If that's your understanding, that all suffering you brought on yourself, you did this, and your doing this killed my kids. If that's your point of view, is Job's wife wrong to be upset in this moment? Keeping in mind, she, like the rest of the characters, don't know this is a test. She, like the rest of the characters, don't know about the Satan. It's not hard to understand when you think about her point of view. Curse God and die. Now the word curse here is a very interesting word because in the Hebrew it can have the same connotation as bless. It's a different word than what will be later when Job says, curse the day I was born. This connotation could be translated, bless the Lord and die, but that wouldn't make much sense, would it? And especially Job's response to her, you speak like one of the foolish women. So this must be some sort of negative thing that she's saying to him. And die. Die because I'm done with you? Die because you cursed God? Does she understand it as a result of God's punishment? If that's what she meant, we have to understand that she's only seeing things from her empirical view. Only what she's experiencing. Now, we do that ourselves, don't we? We rely on our empirical experiences to inform our world, our life, our things, right? How many times, though, the way we see things, that's not the way it actually is? Here in our story, we already know that. How many times have you experienced something and you thought that it was because of this? You acted based on that assumption, only to come to find out you were completely wrong. Your assumption was wrong. That happens to us too. So let's be very careful before we condemn Job's wife too quickly, huh? Keeping in mind, once again, she's unaware of the Satan and so forth. One of our problems, one of the issues with everything is that we have to use language to communicate, huh? And language is from a human perspective. And therefore, just by its nature, it's restricted. How many of you have ever experienced something and you just don't know the word for that experience? We have emotions, right? How many of you have ever felt angry sad? And perhaps there's a better word. Perhaps there's actually a word for angry sad. I don't know it. Maybe we could look it up in the dictionary one day. How many of you have felt happy sad? I mean, it exists. What is that? What would we ever call happy sad other than happy sad? We're also very finite, aren't we? One of the things that I've told people is if Groundhog's Day ever happened to me, that is, I get caught in that loop, in that cycle, I actually have a plan for what I'm going to do. I just became immortal for a time period. I've got so much learning to do. I've got so many books to read. I would enjoy. I've actually prayed for Groundhog. No, I've not. But you get me. We are finite. We are limited. Our experiences are finite and limited, and our knowledge is also finite and limited. And that just comes about, once again, going back to that empirical thing. Who here has ever actually been to China? Okay. Who here has ever actually been to Southern Africa? Who here has been to Australia? Where have you not been? Who here has been to Madagascar? Oh, okay. Well, you guys have been to... Who here has been to Madagascar? Yay! There, I win. I thought of someplace we haven't been. So since nobody here has ever been to Madagascar, nobody here has any empirical data about Madagascar, do we? Should we then assume that Madagascar doesn't exist? That would be a horrible assumption, wouldn't it? Once again, we, as humanly creatures, we're temporal, we're trapped inside of time. I was actually trying to figure out, what would it even be like to be outside of time? Right?
Stop and contemplate that.
I would. I was actually trying to figure out if even the theory of antimatter, and here's the best example I've ever known about antimatter. Imagine everything was a tub of ice cream. Okay? Everything is a tub of ice cream. And this giant scoop comes and takes out one scoop of ice cream. And now, as far as that tub, which is everything, ignore the scoop now, what's not ice cream now would be antimatter. That's my best understanding of antimatter. What would anti-time be? Anyways. Now another thing that's going on in Job's wife's mind is definitely embedded theology. Now here's what embedded theology is. I have embedded theology and you have embedded theology. Embedded theology is what you were raised with, what you were born into, what you first learned. Mom, grandma, Bible school teacher, pastor, priest, bishop, whoever first ever told you anything about God and you accepted it and it's still inside of you, that's embedded theology. How many Lutherans of record are there in the world? That is to say, they've never left the Lutheran church. They've never said, I'm not a Lutheran, but they're not a Lutheran. They don't believe, they don't practice, they don't show up, maybe they're an EC Lutheran, they show up on Easter and Christmas. The same with Catholic, the same with all of these things. Why is that? That there's a huge portion of the population that will never actually say, I'm not a Lutheran, or I'm not a Catholic, or even though they're not practicing. Because that requires the admission that mom and grandma and grandpa and so on are wrong. And that's not always an easy thing for somebody to admit. That somebody you love, somebody you respect, somebody you emulate was wrong. Now they could be incorrect. That's a nicer way. That's kind of a back away quietly. Don't draw any attention to yourself in that kind. Embedded theology is actually very hard to even recognize sometimes. I mean, if you were to write down all of your theology, how would you even identify every point that's embedded theology versus you've learned it theology? One final point I have to make when it comes to Job's wife is what we have here is theology in crisis, which is not crisis theology. Crisis theology and neo-orthodoxy, we barely touched on them back in Why Are There So Many Denominations. I hope to touch on this again in the future, but I definitely wanted to make a distinction here that theology in crisis and crisis theology are two different things. Theology in crisis is what we meet every day when we experience life. I'll give you an example from my own experience. Ask my wife if I'm exaggerating or if I'm lying. Here, when my feet are on planet Earth, God is a good God who has good things in store for me and going to do good things in my life. Put me on an airplane and get me up here thousands of feet above the air and give me a little bit of turbulence. Give me a little bit of this. God is a bad God who's out to get me, and He's willing to take out everybody else to make it look like an accident. Bring it back down, and we land, and my feet are again here on planet Earth. God is a good God who does good things, who's going to do good things for me and everybody else. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. Because at that moment, I'm experiencing theology in crisis. Theology in crisis is not the time to be writing your theological treatise, is it? Now, something happens to you. I don't know what happens to you. Something happens to you. And in that moment, we're dialoguing and you say, how could God let this happen? I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm not going to judge you for one moment that you made that statement. Because in crisis, we say all sorts of things, don't we? We politely today call it post-traumatic stress. We used to call it shell shock. And when you're in the situation, when you're in the fire, are you really contemplating everything? Are you really balancing out all of the arguments on any given topic? Or are you in crisis, and are you then in crisis mode? So when it comes to Job's wife, I think we have to handle her nicely. I believe that she has also suffered this loss. Her wealth is gone. Her children are gone. She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know why. And she's buying into the theology of the day. That is, suffering is a result of what you did. You brought this about. And now I'm mad at you because your actions killed my kids. I think we need to approach Job's wife with a little bit of humility, because I think we can join her in her theology at any given moment. Job's response to her, you speak like those who don't know God, or those who don't believe in God. You probably read the text, actually. You speak like the foolish women. Well, there's no way we can ever know who exactly Job had in mind when he said the foolish women. But we do know Psalms chapter 14, verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Job's also in crisis, so let's not judge him too harshly with how he responded to his wife in crisis here. But he's basically saying that, you're speaking foolishness right now. Notice that the author has already said that Job's words were not foolish, but nobody ever says that the wife's words are not foolish. In fact, Job says that the wife's words are not foolish. Job chapter 1 and chapter 2 are incredibly hard chapters because they bring out these questions. They're hard lessons for us to learn today. I think that a lot of us should learn from this. I'm of the opinion that there's no passage in the Old Testament, no passage in the New Testament that tells believers you get a pass. You get a pass on suffering. I just don't think that that's in the Bible. Now, I think that that's a teaching today, and I think that's out there today, and I don't think that it's very grounded in Scripture. Now, I can see why it's attractive, because become a Christian, and God will make you win the lottery, and God will take care of all your health issues, and all of those kinds of things. Well, heck yeah, I want to sign up for that. It's not true, but I want to sign up for it, huh? In all of his words, in his lips, Job has not sinned. Satan's test has failed. Job's words are not sins. His words are an observation, and he's trying to explain his situation, isn't he? Like we just said, he's also in crisis here, and he's searching for words to explain why this has happened to him. We all need to explain things, don't we? We all need to have theories that have explanatory power. Even if in the back of our head we know it's not true, in that moment of crisis, there's something about somebody just patting you on the back and saying, it's going to be all right. Unfortunately, that's not what Job's friends say, huh? Here we meet Job's friends. We meet Eliphaz, the Temanite, Bildad, the Shuhite, Zophar, the Naamathite, and this mysterious figure Elihud, who just starts talking at the end, towards the end of the book, and he's not been introduced. Whoever he is and wherever he comes from, obviously he's been present for much of the conversation, and I think that that's an important thing, especially when we get to the part about him and what we can pull out of his thing. I think he's been here since the friends have arrived. I think he's been paying attention, but we'll get to him in time. Eliphaz the Temanite, he comes from the city of Teman, which is in Edom. Edom would be Esau, which again is why we believe that this should be put in the time of the patriarchs. The precise location of Teman is unknown, and I don't think it's very important. But Edom was known for their value of wisdom. We see that in Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 7. We see that in Obadiah, verse 7. I don't know why your notes have that there. We'll just skip down to Bildad the Shuhite. Obviously, I made a typo in my editing there. Bildad the Shuhite. Bildad, the name means son of contention. I'd love to sit down with his parents and find out, why did you name your son of contention? I think that's very interesting. He's an Arab tribe. There's been a lot of trying to pin down who exactly these guys are and where exactly they come from. He's probably a descendant of Shusha, or however you pronounce that is probably correct, one of Abraham's sons from another mother. Zophar the Naamathite, his name means chirping, which once again is one of those, you kind of want to sit down with the author of the book of Job and get his thoughts behind this, because I believe you're making a reference, but I just don't get the reference. Help us out here. Not the Naamans who lived in the territory of Judah that the Israelites had to deal with. His home country is actually unknown. Maybe it's in northwest Arabia. Maybe it's in southern Arabia. There's a lot of questions about that. One final thing is that depending on your translation, every chapter when the next person speaks, it usually says, and Job answered, or Bildad answered, or so-and-so answered. The word answered there is not the way we use the word answered, as in, I asked you, what time does the class start? And you answered, the class starts at this time. The word answered here is much more just response. Not so much, here's what you said, and I'm going to answer your questions that you put forward, but much more, I'm going to just respond to what you said. And I think that that's something that if you use the word answered wrong, you're really going to get confused here in the book of Job. With that, we're getting close to our break. Hey all, Pastor Ozzy here. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, feel free to share it. And if you want more, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified when new videos are available. Again, thank you so much.